everybody. Welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com.
Happy Wednesday morning and welcome to another episode of the Abroaders Podcast. I'm Erik here with AJ in Austin, Texas. This is episode 172. Hey AJ, how's it going, man?
Going well, man. Business as usual here in Austin. All is well. Man, so what do we have? What do we have on the docket for the show today? I haven't even had a chance to look at the core content. It's some family travel stuff?
Doing it live in honor of good old Bill O'Reilly. Not sad to see that happen. All right, so today we've got, we're going to talk a little bit about credit scores. We got a really good question that came in from Recon Scott, actually. And this was one that I was planning on getting into in detail, but the question comes down to the differences between the Vantage score and FICO. So we're going to dive into that a little bit. We've got news and updates, a couple of devaluations, one potentially slightly positive change. And then we've also got a section to talk a little bit at the end of the show about LAP children. We talked a little while back about that person that got bailed out by a really nice person.
Yeah, because the kid turned however old the limit is, and they got stuck with it.
The kid hit the 2-year limit a couple of days before the flight. So we have gotten a few questions about that, and it can be kind of complicated. So Janelle did an awesome job of compiling rules across like 7 or 8 programs. So there's fortunately a couple of sweet spots where you can potentially be able to fly even internationally with a child in your lap that's under 2 years old and pay nothing or maybe 10% of the retail cost of the ticket. So we're going to run through those options as well. Let's start out with some program news. So we just got a minor devaluation from Life Miles. So this is Avianca, the Brazilian-based carrier's Star Alliance program.
Are they Colombian? I thought they were Colombian-based.
What did I say?
You said Brazilian-based.
Shit. They have a Brazil.
Yeah, they do have Avianca Brazil.
So this is not Avianca Brazil's program. This is Avianca Colombia's program, Life Miles. These guys are sort of notorious for selling miles super cheap. It's kind of the easy way, if you don't have access to points earned from credit cards, to be able to buy award points that you can use for business and first class redemptions. This is not a huge change overall. So this is actually, I consider it really good news because they didn't mess with the award rates for almost all the flights that most people are going to care about. So they decreased, first of all, the only thing that changed about their chart so far has been flights to Oceania. So this is Australia, New Zealand, and a bunch of the islands in the Pacific. And so that's the only thing that's changed. So flights out of the United States, unless they're going to that region, have not been affected. So this is actually really good news because hopefully this means they're not going to make any other changes in the near future. We're going to link to an article that talks about the ups and downs on this. The reductions in price are not very helpful. There's a reduction from Australia and New Zealand to the United States in first class, but nobody offers first class service. So that's a fake discount for the time being. And it's not a huge change. And then there's a small reduction for flights from Oceania to South America.
Things happen fast. Somebody's going to operate that flight with a first class cabin before they change it. That's my prediction.
Yeah.
I mean, every week we talk about, there's a new flight going here and it's a new plane and fancy that 3-class service, so
right now United's kind of leading the way, and they operate all those flights between the US and Australia and New Zealand on the 787s, which don't have a first class cabin. But I think you're right, there's definitely room where that could change.
Please find a leg-year flight in first class, maybe make it worthwhile. Who knows, wherever you're going to be connecting. But
yeah, so if you're looking at flights in and out of that region, there are increases for the price to Brazil, Hawaii, to Europe, South Africa, North Asia, Central and South Asia. So the changes are pretty minor. In general, like the first class price is going up like 10 to 15,000 points. Business class about the same, and economy is moving 5 to 10. So not a huge change. Life miles are still pretty valuable. And again, the prices overall are higher than you would find with United and a couple of the other programs. So this isn't necessarily the first choice, but for buying cheap business and first class tickets, it could be useful. So just something to take a look at. And if you do have travel for the Oceania region, check out the show notes and we'll have a link over there with the actual details on any of the changes that did happen here.
Yeah. So speaking of program changes and devaluations, we've got a little bit more news about Delta. So I think it was last week we touched on the fact that Delta appeared to devalue some partner awards, and it's a little bit worse than we originally thought. So what we talked about was if you could find a way to tack on a Delta operated flight on a partner award, you would show not necessarily the saver level because they don't even have it because they don't have a chart, but the price in miles would be cheaper.
Yep.
And now it appears that any partner operated flight you have is going to be more expensive. So unless it's exclusively Delta operated, it says Delta on the side of the plane, you're going to pay a little bit more. The example I saw, I think it was 95,000 miles versus 80,000 miles, or 90 versus 80. So a little bit of a difference. So what we spoke about if you could find a way to tack on a Delta operated flight to your award, it looks like that was a glitch and they fixed the glitch. So
great. All right. So we've got one earning points thing. Now, we kind of went back and forth about whether to mention this. I kind of hate on the dining programs, but this one's sort of a bigger bonus and could be worth it if you live in the right type of place.
Yeah, so what we've got here is with United, they've got a dining program that you can enroll into. Ultimately, there's 4,000 miles on the table, so you have to opt into this with your credit card, and then ultimately you can rack up 4,000 miles by you get your card hooked up to the dining program, you get 500 miles, you make a purchase over $25 at a restaurant, you get 1,000, and then 500 each time until you get up to 4,000. So what we're talking about is this is a decent opportunity for somebody that they enjoy to eat out, maybe picking up the tab for a significant other, or you go to places where the bill's going to be bigger than $25 for yourself. And if you're going to go there anyways, give a quick look at which restaurants are participating. I would imagine if you're in a big city, you shouldn't have any problem finding places that you'd like. And if you're going to eat anyways, may as well pick up the miles. But
the nice thing about this is once you get it set up, so the way you just basically connect one or more cards. And so a lot of people, what they do is they'll use have one particular card be their United dining card and another card be their American card. And they're just sort of tacked onto your account. So if you use that card at one of the restaurants that participates, the credit should be automatic.
Yeah.
This is not the kind of thing that, is usually worth the time. I looked up Austin and there were 120 restaurants, which sounds like a lot, but Austin's a big place with 5,000 restaurants.
A lot of restaurants, yeah.
So once I looked at that, I was like, no way am I going to waste time signing up when, 1 in 100 restaurants is
I could see this could be an opportunity for somebody that's trying to scrap together some miles and they only need a little bit more to be able to book an award, or they, aren't having luck with credit card applications now and they're having difficulty earning. So I guess use your own discretion.
And especially if you're in downtown Chicago, there's probably a ton of restaurants within
a lot of places that you
distance.
Probably already go to anyway. So then it's worth a couple minutes to set it up.
All right, so next up, just real quick announcement. I was happy to see this. American is adding a flight to Cartagena, Colombia. So that's another direct flight out of Miami. And so now they're going to be serving Bogota, Medellin, and Cartagena. So one more option to get to Cartagena direct.
Any idea how far that is? Because Miami to Cartagena is a little bit closer than Bogota.
Miles.
Okay.
So it's still in the British Airways. It's under, I think 1,200 is one of the zones. I think it goes 600 miles and then 1,200. So, potentially it could be a nice sweet spot compared to the slightly longer flight down to Medellin or Bogota. Bogota. So that's good and should help with award availability. Not super wide open right now, but also not terrible. Definitely some economy seats. And for a 3-hour flight, I definitely wouldn't worry about playing business.
Just get there. So speaking of American miles, we've got another buy miles promo where they've got kind of the tiered bonuses depending on how many miles you buy. It's a little bit different than the one that they had a couple weeks ago. It wasn't that long ago. So just like always, the moral of the story is if you have some business class flights you want to target and you'd actually consider buying them, you can just buy miles and save a bunch of money. Otherwise, you probably want to lay off because looking at the breakdown from the points guy, you've got to spend about $3,000 to get the price per point down to 2 cents. So, so business class looks great. Economy class, I don't know. Good.
Yeah. All right, we'll link up in the show notes. This does end Friday, so you've got a couple of days, and there are small bonuses at the bottom of the table as well. So you can get a 1,500 mile bonus or a 6,000 mile bonus for smaller purchases. So if you're close to a redemption level, that could work out for you as well. And again, show notes at abroaders.com/172. All right, so next up, I wanted to mention this because you and I are both T-Mobile customers. We've used their global data quite a bit, and it looks like Sprint has just come out with a very similar mobile data plan where you get the slow speeds in a bunch of countries. They've actually outdone T-Mobile by 25 countries in terms of coverage. So instead of 140 countries, they got 165. That's nice. The thing that I really like, though, is the option to buy fast data. It's $5 a day or $25 $25 a week, which is still pretty steep if you're someplace long term. But I can think of a lot of weeks that I would have spent $25 in Brazil to have the fast data and be able to keep my same speed. So not something I'm going to jump ship and head over to Sprint.
Is there pricing parity? Is it like the same cost as T-Mobile, more or less?
I think it's pretty close. It might even be a little bit cheaper. Again, I don't know how the coverage is in the U.S. My T-Mobile coverage sucks here in Austin. So
yeah, mine is not very good. It gets the job done, but there's a lot of weak spots.
Yeah, like walking to the trash area or something in our apartments, no service.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got also...
Man, this is big news.
Yeah,
this is really big news.
News.
This is not like disappointing news as far as like all your miles are worth nothing, but Bangkok, so the city has decided to do something that has gotten a lot of flack, and that is essentially get rid of street vendors. And the main thing that comes to mind is street food, because Bangkok is such a big foodie city, and there's all these street stalls, and there's like a lot of great street food, and it's kind of something the city's hung their hat on. And it looks like they're going to try to clear it out by the end of 2017. A couple of the notable spots would be Khao San Road, super touristy, but still, if you have never been there, just go mess around for a night. And then Chinatown as well. But it's not just, it's all over the city. And they're saying that they're trying to promote cleanliness, order, and safety. And this seems, I mean, if they care about order and safety, don't make a bunch of people become unemployed.
Yeah.
Because there's some people, the family stalls, they've had the recipe, they've been selling for 100 years in the same damn pot, the same wok they're cooking from. And I don't know, I think it's stupid. There's got to be a better way.
Yeah, I was just really surprised to see this. I mean, that was one of my favorite things about Bangkok, not least because of that hot food experience that we had on our first trip. So AJ and I ordered, I think, as mild as you could possibly get, and mine was almost too hot. And I think yours was medium. And
I went with spicy, but it wasn't like the extra spicy. It was like, mild, medium, spicy. I'm like, I handle spicy food well. I'll do spicy. And I was really hungry, and I think I only made it through 3 or 4 bites of the food.
It was impossible. So hopefully that gets sorted out. I think that'll be a bummer for Bangkok, sort of just.
I think there will be a little bit of a resistance.
You can't stop people, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've got to form some kind of like informal union and just say, screw it, we're just going to sell our food because this is our livelihood, and they can make us leave.
Any idea if this has already happened, or is this in talks?
Well, I mean, it's almost May. And they're talking about having it done by the end of 2017. So
in process, not.
It's not something that's not a done deal yet. But
hurry out to get your street food if you're.
Yeah, I suppose.
All right. So next up, this is another just kind of random news item, but I thought this was really, really strange that, we've had a lot of discussions recently about the confrontations between people on planes and flight attendants and, the enforcement that gets brought on to bring somebody off. Just this week, somebody else was ejected from another flight. There was a stroller incident. There were like 2 or 3 that came through this week. And Air India has announced that they're going to start creating huge fines for passengers that delay flights, like in the thousands of dollars.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They're like the second or third worst airline out there in terms of on time, just credentials by the folks that keep track of that. So it'd be super interesting to see if this actually happens. I would imagine a large percentage of the people that fly Air India just cannot afford these fines. I mean, I can't afford a $7,000 fine.
Yeah, that's heavy.
That seems really hard to enforce, but maybe it gets people to behave better.
Yeah, I guess so, man. So some news that we came across earlier this week was really interesting. So I don't know if any of you guys have heard of Plastic. It was PLASTC. It's one of these companies that was making like a smart credit card. You have one credit card you can load all of your accounts on. And long story short, they went OB. They went out of business. And the kicker is they had a hell of a lot of people that pre-ordered their card to the tune of like $9 million or something in pre-order. It was millions of dollars. I'm not sure exactly how much, but it was millions of dollars. Don't quote me exactly on that $9 million figure, but they're selling them for like $155 a pop, had a bunch of them. And what
You're right on the money.
What they ended up saying was, in my opinion, it's piss poor. As a founder of a company, you know when you're in hot water and you got to try to do some things to at least get some people their money back. But they claimed that they were seeking some investments from venture capitalists, and they were supposed to get $3.5 million, and a deal fell through, and then another deal fell through. And
this is not, first of all, this is not the first company that's tried this model and hasn't gotten to market. So I remember there was one called, I think Coin was one a while while back. There was another
was
one.
one called One Card?
One Card was another one, and they, as far as I know, they never got off the ground.
Big question I have here
about investing in any of these pre-order scenarios for a card. The idea is like, you just use this one card, and it's got all your other cards in there, saved in the card's chip or whatever, and it will be intelligent about using the type that maximizes your points, which is a great idea. But clearly, there's some issues with their partnerships with each of the banks. Maybe the banks don't want them to. Like, I could see where the security
it's understandable.
issues would be huge.
I really want to know what these people were paying themselves. If these salaries were getting north of $100,000 or whatever, pretty ballsy to take a bunch of pre-orders and pay yourself a lot of money and claim that you just got nothing left to give anyone.
Yeah.
That seems pretty weak sauce. I mean, I don't know. That's pretty.
And they raised tens of millions of dollars too. So they took.
I don't know if it was tens of millions, but they raised. I mean, from pre-orders versus, and they also took on venture capital and. But yeah, they took on over. It ended up being more than $10 million, and they have nothing to show for it. So. Yikes. So be careful before you buy some crazy pre-order concept thing on Kickstarter, because there are real risks involved.
For sure. All right. So we've got some updates on credit card benefits that I wanted to run through. Now, we've talked a couple of times about the Prestige card, and one of the biggest benefits for that card is having the fourth night free benefit, where you book 3 nights paid, and Citi essentially is going to pay for your fourth night. They're making a small change along with a bunch of other changes on July 23rd. We're going to talk more about it as that date approaches, but I wanted to give people a heads up now about the way that they're changing the fourth night free. First of all, the benefit is not going away, so that's good news. Previously, they would reimburse you for the average nightly cost of your fourth night stay. So essentially, like if you had 3 nights in a row that were $100 and the fourth night was $300, they would reimburse you for the $300 fourth night stay.
Okay.
And in July, they're changing that to just give you the average of all nights. So you're going to get less. There was this sort of loophole where you could make the last night of your stay the most expensive. You could get a bunch of extra value. So that's going to go away. And they're also not going to reimburse the taxes and fees on the fourth night, which is usually not huge, but they're 2 small, subtle things. The good news is that hopefully with this change, they're going to be able to support this benefit going on for the long term. It seems like some people were maybe, I don't know how you could actually take that much of an advantage of, the fourth night, because it's kind of a lot of things have to fall into place to have that work out perfectly. But that's something worth knowing. And then that and a bunch of other things. So the date that these changes are going to go into effect is July 23rd. And it looks like any hotels you book now are going to fall under the old rules. So book away if you've got plans that you've got pretty solid.
All right, so we've got till almost the end of July.
And along with that change in July, we're going to be losing our free golf, unfortunately. So we got to get around to
figure out some courses around here we can get out to.
And also, they're going to stop offering 1.6 cents for American Airlines redemptions for paid tickets on American. I've used that benefit 3 or 4 times. I think it's just going to go back down to 1.25 instead of 1.6. So a couple of negative changes coming up in the medium future, but worth being prepared for, and see if you can get some of those bookings done before it happens.
Yeah. Speaking of program news, and not great news, but we could expect this. So Amex, they are slowing. It appears that they're slowing down how quickly you get your 50% points rebate. So like you've said here in the notes, the terms and conditions said that it could take 6 to 10 weeks. However, previously people were reporting that, they were posting within 1 or 2 days. But now it looks like that is not the case. We don't know exactly how long, but we've got some reports that they are not posting within the first week. Maybe they'll post in the second week, maybe the third. We don't know, but I guess the moral of the story is, as opposed to the old way where you could expect them in 1 to 2 days and really rely on using those points and putting them to work soon, you might have to wait over 2 months now. But I guess we'll just keep you updated and see what the reports have to say about
right. And this is for the Amex Business Platinum card. So if you have that card, you can get 50% of your points back when you buy a cash fare. If it's economy, it's got to be on your chosen airline. If it's business or first class, it can be on any airline. So this is a really good way if you have super tight travel plans that often don't fit in with award availability. This is a way you can just buy a $2,000 cash ticket and you'll pay 200,000 Amex membership rewards, but you'll get half of those back. Right. So now that extra, most people are using this benefit for expensive tickets. And so you're looking at potentially having a huge chunk of points that is now delayed.
Might take a little bit longer now.
Anyway, so we'll continue to report on that as we find out more and figure out when the updated posting timeframe has come in. All right. So last up, before we get to the core content today, I wanted to touch on a question that Scott sent along about the credit scores and the possible difference between the scores that might be reported for your CreditKarma. Lots of people are using that free website.
Right.
And CreditKarma actually uses the Vantage score, Vantage score 3. And a lot of the banks, when you get a free score that comes along with one of your credit cards, Citibank has this, Barclays has a couple of cards that offer a credit score. Most of those are provided by FICO. So I wanted to dive into what the differences are. The main thing that you should keep in mind through all of this is that generally speaking, the same types of things that are good for your credit are good for your credit, whether it's calculated with a Vantage score or a FICO score. So paying your bills on time, keeping your overall use of credit down, your utilization. So none of that big stuff has changed. But Vantage score is gaining market share really quickly. And so a lot of the banks are starting to use Vantage score, which is good if you're monitoring your CreditKarma, you're seeing the score that the banks are eventually going to see. But they've also made a big change in terms of how they measure things around your utilization. And so what Vantage score is now doing is they're trying to deal with the trajectory of your utilization and your history of your utilization more so than what's actually going on right now. So for example, the older model would say if you have, let's say you make a big purchase that almost maxes out your card, you still plan on paying it off in full at the end of the month, that is going to ding your credit score under the current model and how FICO does it, just because your utilization went way up. And by paying that balance down, your score should recover right away. The new model with Vantage score is they're looking more at your utilization history. So it's great news for folks that have just a temporary short-term high utilization because it's not as likely to impact your score.
Yeah, maybe they don't have a huge credit line, but they use a lot of it, but they consistently pay it all off.
Right. And so as long as you normally have low utilization, you're in really good shape. This is bad news for people that have chronic high utilization, because if you just tend to have your cards at a pretty high percentage of utilization and you just want to go in and pay everything down before you do a round of applications, under this new system, it's going to basically say, well, yeah, your utilization's super low right now, but it's usually high, so you're probably still a big risk. So I think the bottom line here is that there's not much you can do about this besides being mindful of what your overall history looks like, knowing that this Vantage score model is potentially going to disadvantage you for having high utilization all the time. So you want to just try and keep that in mind. Manage your credit in a way that keeps your utilization low on average, rather than just when you want to apply.
So maybe that means paying your bill off twice a month, right? At the 2-week mark, and then when the bill's due, to keep your utilization.
Yes. Some good news with this, however, and this is a little bit older in terms of this. They released this a few months ago, and I think we mentioned at one point, but the Vantage score is also going to be a lot nicer about your tax liens and civil judgments. So nasty things that are in the past, those, if they can't match 3 out of 4 criteria, which are your name, address, birthday, and social security, if they can't get at least 3 out of those 4 to match, it's getting wiped off completely. Wow. So that's a really good thing, and that's targeted because there's some legislation that's saying, like, wait a minute, we have a huge number of people that are seeing bad results in their credit score for something that's not theirs. Right. And so making it match those criteria was something that they
putting a little bit of the burden back in the collections agency.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, if you guys have further questions about this, we can definitely get more into the Vantage score and the FICO and differences there. But again, just the main recap here is that the most important thing is still paying your bills on time and using relatively low amounts of the credit that you have available. If you are applying for a credit card, most likely it's going to still be a FICO score, which may be different than the score you see when you check out CreditKarma, because that's a different model. But you're going to see banks starting to use the Vantage score most likely in the future. And so overall, just keeping those fundamental principles of maintaining good credit, that's the best path to success.
Good to know, man.
All right. Alrighty, so that's going to do it for the news and updates part of the show. I'm going to now get into some tips for traveling with a family, specifically if you're traveling with little ones under the age of 2 years old. Most airlines are going to accommodate your little tykes by not making you pay full price for a seat. But there are some significant differences to the lap child rules, especially when you book a ticket using your frequent flyer points. And so for today's show, a big thank you, first of all, to Janelle, who spent a couple of hours digging through not fun terms and conditions, reading websites, and calling airlines to try and figure out how this stuff works. So first and foremost, I'm going to run through the big U.S. carriers and what their rules are. There's not a ton of diversity generally, just in terms of how this is handled. So most airlines are going to charge you either a flat rate or a percentage of the adult ticket. But there are some sweet spots when you're booking with points. So for today's lesson, I suppose, for today's episode, I want to share the way that you can try and maximize the value that you're going to get if you're booking an award ticket. So we're going to assume that either one or two adults is traveling on a frequent flyer award ticket, just a basic redeeming miles for travel, and how that ticket influences the rules, if at all, for getting your child on the plane, either on your lap or in their own seat without a bunch of extra costs. Okay, and first up, the one thing you should be aware of is within the U.S., that most of your flights inside the U.S. are going to be operated by one of the big U.S. carriers, and they all pretty much have no fees for adding a lap child as long as you're not flying internationally. So the lesson today is going to apply mostly for international tickets. So with mileage awards domestically, you're probably not going to have to pay anything at all. You do need to contact the airline to just let them know that you're going to have a lap child. And often you will have to pay taxes and fees, but that should be super minimal, under $10 or under $15 for a round trip. Okay, so first up, for international flights, let's start with the ones that are pretty straightforward and all the same. American, Delta, and United all charge 10% of the adult revenue ticket. The one thing to be aware of is that this is not always going to be the cheapest adult ticket that you could find. So it's not super explicit on any of their websites what revenue fare they use to calculate that 10%. So when you're looking at booking an award ticket, you do want to be kind of careful in the sense that if mom and dad find a great award ticket, and they are able to use their points, you want to make sure that the fare that they're going to use for the 10% of the revenue fare to pay for your lap child is not going to be super, super high. So always take a look at the paid fares and maybe confirm what that 10% rate is going to be calculated from before you actually confirm the award ticket. But those three programs, United, American, and Delta, are all pretty straightforward, just going to pay 10% of whatever the revenue ticket is. Southwest is a little bit more generous. There are no fees for having a lap child except for taxes and fees. So you're just going to pay the taxes on international flights with Southwest. Now, most of their route network is domestic. And so in that case, it's just going to be really small, just like $10 to $15 in taxes for domestic flights. But I believe they have a cap at $50 for the international stuff. So if you can use Southwest to travel to either the Caribbean or Mexico or some relatively close international destination, it should be super cost effective to do that with a little one. JetBlue is pretty similar. There's no fee to bring a child along, even at the last minute. They do require them to have their own ticket. So you do need to contact them and let them know that you've got a child under 2 that's going to be traveling with you, and you will pay the taxes and fees, which again, somewhere between $6 and $50. But this could be really good. So I'd say JetBlue and Southwest are really good choices for short international flights. You're going to have an advantage over American. If you're just paying the taxes and fees on Southwest or JetBlue, compare that to paying 10% of a regular economy airfare for your child. That's a really good deal. So look for Southwest and JetBlue, especially if you're booking international to one of the places that they serve. Okay, so now it's time to get into the international programs. The first one I'm going to mention is Singapore. There's actually nothing special about Singapore, but it is a transfer currency that's partners with all 4 of the major transferable. So if you do have Singapore miles, you can add a lap child for 10% of the paid ticket cost plus taxes and fees. So that's probably the one that's least exciting out of the international. So just wanted to cover that because we have so many people that are using Singapore KrisFlyer miles. So not a horrible deal, but you might be able to do better with some of these other programs. Okay, so first up is Aeroplan. Aeroplan's transfer partners with Amex and SPG. And they have a flat fee system, which is a really good deal. You can pay the flat fee in Aeroplan miles or in cash. I highly recommend you pay in cash because they're giving you 1 cent per point in value. So in other words, for a lap child in economy, it's either 5,000 Aeroplan miles or $50. Now you should probably always pay that $50 instead of the 5,000. So I'm just going to give the cash prices, but the equivalent charge in miles, if you just happen to have a bunch of them, is going to be the same 1 cent per point. So premium economy is a $75 fee, business is a $100 fee, and first class is a $125 fee. So depending on the revenue ticket, that could be a much better deal than a lot of these. So imagine that you're flying to Europe using Aeroplan, and the revenue fare that they calculate, that 10%, is like a full fare economy ticket that's $1,700. Well, instead of paying $170 for your child, if you book through Aeroplan on an award ticket, you can pay just $50. So that's a really nice sweet spot. That's probably my favorite out of these options as far as just a super fair rate. And they have access to Star Alliance, which gives you access to basically the whole world in terms of being able to get to your destination. And it's a super reasonable fare system for bringing a lap child, and also easy to get those points by transferring from Amex. So that's a really good one. Next up is ANA, which is also a member of Star Alliance. They're transfer partners with Amex and SPG as well. And they have kind of an interesting thing, and this is super valuable if you are planning a long haul ticket, because I don't personally have a 2-year-old, but I would not want one sitting on my lap for a 15-hour flight, especially in economy, but not in business, or just that's a long time to have a child occupying the same seat as you. And so ANA is a nice advantage where you can actually pay 10% of the adult revenue ticket, and your lap child will get their own seat. So that is a really good deal. And so that's something to keep in mind, especially for travel to Japan or Asia. Otherwise, they seem to be the only one that Janelle came across where you actually can pay that surcharge and get your child to have their own seat. So that's something definitely to keep in mind there. Next up is British Airways. They're a member of One World Alliance, transfer partners with Amex, Chase, and SPG. They also charge 10% of the cost of the ticket in miles redeemed, which is different. Most of the other ones, so all the other ones so far, are the cash price of the ticket that you booked your award on. And so British Airways is charging 10% of the mileage cost. And that potentially could be a much better deal. Especially with economy, where again, like if you're paying 10% of a full fare economy, it could be as much as $170 or $200. Whereas if you're paying the booking price, 10% of the miles, a round trip to Europe is likely to cost somewhere between 50 and 70,000 miles. Could be even a lot less if you have direct flights. So that could be a really good way to reduce that cost, not have quite so much out of pocket. So there's a lot of destinations, it looks like, with British Airways that you could get a really good fare for you and your adult companion and have your child only cost 10% of the additional miles. Now, when Janelle was working on this project, she came across something pretty interesting with British Airways. And that is, if you're using your Avios to fly domestically within the US, you can leave out your infant or lap child that you're traveling with and avoid paying that 10% fee in miles. So in other words, if you're booking a New York City to Los Angeles flight on American and you book through British Airways using your Avios points, what you want to do is not include your lap child and then just call American to add the child to the itinerary, because American, because it's a domestic flight, they will add that lap child with no extra fee. So you're not going to pay 10% of the miles or 10% of the full fare for those domestics. Now, if you're flying internationally using British Airways, let's say, from the US to Madrid, and you want to do the lap child thing, you do want to have them added to the reservation. And fortunately, you can do that on the British Airways website when you're making the booking, and it should calculate out correctly where they're only charging you 10% of the miles required for the adult fare. So AJ and I went from Madrid, or I think Barcelona, to JFK last year. It's a 20,000 point ticket. So that's only 2,000 miles for a one-way. If you want to add your child, that's a really good deal. So this is one of my other favorites. Last up, we've got Flying Blue. They're a member of SkyTeam. They're also partners with Delta. And Flying Blue charges 10% of the adult revenue fare, just like a lot of the other ones. But I wanted to bring this up because Janelle discovered that they could not issue tickets on partner airlines. So in other words, if you're flying exclusively on Air France or KLM, that's their own metal, so to speak, then you will actually be able to have them give you a lap child ticket they can issue that ticket, and they're going to charge you 10% of the adult fare. However, if you've got a domestic segment or a segment operated by, let's say, Delta, for example, so Paris to JFK is on Air France, and then JFK to Atlanta is on Delta, you're still going to have to contact Delta for a lap seat on the Delta operated segment. Air France can only take care of that for you for the international segment on their own operated flight. So that's basically it. Just a quick recap here. American, Delta, and United are going to charge 10%. Southwest and JetBlue are a little bit better. It's just taxes and fees, so you're going to save some money on international flights with them. Singapore is a standard 10%, as is Flying Blue with Singapore. Looks like you can do that with all of their partners, whereas Flying Blue only on their own metal, and you might have to make a second phone call if you've got a connecting flight. And then the sweet spots, Aeroplan, ANA, and British Airways. Those are the ones that are a little bit better. Aeroplan's just got super low prices, a flat rate for economy, business, and first class in cash. ANA allows you to actually get your own seat for your infant by paying the 10% instead of having them on your lap for the whole flight to Japan. And British Airways charges 10% of the cost of ticket in Avios points rather than the retail cost, which is often going to be a really good deal. All right. Hopefully you guys found that helpful. I know that traveling with little ones is probably not the easiest thing. Don't have any of my own just yet. But for all you parents out there, if you are considering booking a ticket using miles for yourself and the other adults and want to bring one of the little ones along and try and take advantage of some of the stuff we talked about, number one, we would be happy to help you and do all the work for you. Check out our booking service. It's at the website, abroaders.com. And there is no extra fee from us to include any little ones under 2. And I know Janelle has done this a lot of times and has a bunch of experience. So hopefully we can take a little bit of the stress out of planning that international trip with your little ones. So check that out. If you do have experience with this or have any feedback or questions, I would definitely love to hear from folks that have successfully booked these types of tickets and been able to include their young ones on the itinerary and find out sort of what that process was like. So send feedback or questions to support@abroaders.com. And we'll try and get to them on an upcoming show. Thank you guys so much for being with us again today. AJ and I will be back next week, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard. Wherever you are, travel safe.
Hey, Broaders, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your show feedback to Erik or